Inflation isn't dramatic. It doesn't crash through your window at night. It doesn't announce itself with alarms. It doesn't feel like robbery. It feels like normal life. A coffee that used to cost $2 is now $4. Groceries somehow add up to $80. Rent climbs. Insurance climbs. Everything climbs. And you don't panic. Because nothing is technically broken. You still have food. You still have a job. The lights still turn on. But something is happening quietly underneath it all. Inflation is the only thief that can steal from everyone. Without taking anything directly, it doesn't take money from your wallet, it takes value from your life. And most people don't even notice until years are gone. So today, I want to talk about inflation the way it actually works. Not as a headline, not as a number, but as a slow system of erosion. Because inflation isn't just an economic statistic, it's a silent wealth killer. Most people think financial disasters look obvious. A market crash, a recession, a bankruptcy. But inflation doesn't feel like a collapse. It feels like drifting, a little less breathing room, a little more stress, a little more month left at the end of your money. And the reason inflation is so powerful then is because it works slowly. If prices doubled overnight, people would revolt. But if prices rise 5% a year, most people adjust. They complain. They tighten their spending. They cope. And that's the trap. Inflation doesn't destroy your life instantly. It just makes the same life cost more every year. And over time, that becomes a completely different reality. Now, you've probably heard the official number. CPI, Consumer Price Index. The government tells you inflation is 3% or 4% or maybe coming down. And people hear that and think, wait, if inflation is coming down, why does everything still feel expensive? Here's the truth. CPI is an average. Your life is not an average. CPI measures a basket of goods across an entire population. But you don't live inside a basket. You live inside rent, inside groceries, electricity, gas. And those aren't optional. You can downgrade your Netflix subscription. You cannot downgrade your heating bill. You cannot downgrade your landlord. So even when CPI says inflation is moderate, your personal inflation can feel brutal. Because the things you spend most on inflate the fastest. And here's something almost no one understands. Inflation is usually measured year over year. That means CPI is not telling you how expensive life has become. It's telling you how much more expensive life became compared to last year. That sounds similar, but it's completely different. Let me explain. During COVID, prices surged, food jumped, housing exploded, energy spiked. Inflation hit levels people hadn't seen in decades. Then a year later, inflation started falling. The headline said, "Inflation is easing. Inflation is down." But people looked around and thought, down? Down from what? Because groceries weren't cheaper. Rent wasn't cheaper. Nothing went back. And that's because inflation going down doesn't mean prices go down. It means prices are rising more slowly. Inflation is the speed. Prices are the location. If you drive off a cliff at 100 miles per hour and then slow down to 30, you're still falling. So when inflation comes down, you're not returning to normal. You're just climbing at a slower pace from a much higher baseline. That's why people feel gaslit. The number improves, life doesn't. Now here's where inflation becomes a wealth story. Because inflation doesn't hit everyone equally. If you own assets, inflation can actually help you. If you own a house, the price rises. If you own stocks, companies raise prices. If you own real estate, rents go up. But if you don't own, inflation is pure punishment. Because wages don't rise instantly. Savings don't rise at all. Cash just sits there, getting weaker. Inflation is basically a tax on holding money. And the people who suffer most are the people who live paycheck to paycheck, the people who can't invest, the people who can't hedge, Inflation is how the system quietly transfers wealth from savers to owners. And inflation isn't just prices going up. Sometimes it's packages getting smaller. Same cereal box, there is less cereal. Same chips, half the bag is air. This is called shrinkflation. The price doesn't change, but the value does. And that makes inflation even harder to notice. Because the economy learned something, people react more to visible price increases than invisible quality reductions. So inflation became stealthy and smarter. So what's the answer? It's not panic, it's not doom, it's awareness. Inflation punishes people who do nothing with their money. So you don't beat inflation by working harder. You beat it by owning things that grow, even small investments, even slow compounding. Because the only real defense is to stop storing your life in cash. Cash is melting. Assets are engines. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner inflation stops being a mystery and becomes a solvable problem. Inflation isn't a monster. It's a leak, a slow drip, a quiet erosion. And if you don't see it, you wake up 10 years later, working just as hard for half as much life. That's why inflation is the silent wealth killer. Not because it destroys everything overnight, but because it convinces you that nothing is happening until it already has. I'm the Uneducated Economist. Thanks for watching.